Hey girls, welcome back to your lessons for chapter 8, where we're talking all about polynomials. In this lesson, we are going to talk more about factoring polynomials, but this time, on top of looking at the GCF, you are going to factor them by grouping. This method of factoring by grouping is going to be looking at using the distributive property multiple times, and it's used when your polynomials have 4 or more terms. So if you see a problem that says factor it and it has 4 or more terms, you'll want to make sure you always take out the GCF or greatest common factor first, then you'll use this method of factoring by grouping. Alright, let's get into it. Notice that the instructions say to factor each polynomial. The first step is to look at this polynomial and see how many terms are there. There are 4 terms. Remember, terms are split up by plus and minus signs. Do these 4 terms have any common factors? Well, they all have a common factor of 1, but that's it. So then, since it's 4 more terms, we will start by grouping up our terms. You have to split them up into 2 even groups. So with 4 terms, you're going to get 2 groups of 2. When you're splitting up your groups, you want to try to pick groups that have something in common. So I'm going to pick these 2 first terms to go together because I noticed they both could have a 4 go into them, and they both have an R in them. Also, I noticed that for the last 2 terms, they both have a common factor of 3. Now, when you pick your groups, it might not always work out the first time. Most of the time, you're fine. It's not going to be anything too complex, but just note that sometimes you might have to go back and redo your groups if they don't work out the first time. So what I would recommend is to split up your groups with each a different color. Make sure you put a plus sign between your 2 groups. Once you have it split into 2 groups, you're going to take the greatest common factor out of each group. So this is exactly from the last lesson. What's the greatest common factor of 4QR and 8R? We already said that they have a common factor of 4R. 4 can go into both 4 and 8, and obviously they both have an R in them. So 4R is our common factor for the green group. Now look at your pink group. What do 3Q and 6 have in common? They have a common factor of 3. So in the next step, you're going to put the common factor in the front of each group and factor it out, just like we did yesterday. Notice that when you factor out the GCF from each group, I'm keeping them highlighted in their correct colors, and what's left in the parentheses is actually matching. That's the goal. If these 2 parentheses do not match, then you might have done something wrong, or you might need to go back and rearrange your groups. Since these 2 groups have a common factor of Q plus 2, Q plus 2 is multiplied in the green group by 4R, Q plus 2 is multiplied in the pink group by 3. Whenever 2 things have a common factor, you can factor it out. So we're going to treat the Q plus 2 as the common factor. We'll take that out. Q plus 2 comes out to the front. What is Q plus 2 multiplied by in the green group? 4R. So that's what goes first here. What is Q plus 2 multiplied by in the pink group? 3. So that's what goes in the next term in the parentheses. This should make sense because if you took this whole parenthesis and multiplied it by 4R, you would get 4R times Q plus 2. And then if you took this whole parenthesis and multiplied it by 3, you would get your pink group, 3 times Q plus 2, with a plus sign in between because there's a plus sign in between here. Now, you can always also check your work by distributing it out. You know that you should distribute the Q to both terms first, and then distribute the 2 to both terms second. And you'll notice that this is equal to what we started with, so we know we got it right. Therefore, this is our final answer. The factored out form is Q plus 2 times 4R plus 3. Okay, let's try another one. You'll notice that if you try to group up the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms here, you don't really have any common factors. 2 and 15, their only common factor is 1. 6 and 5 only share a common factor of 1. So there's a couple ways you can do this, but I'm going to choose to put the 2u squared v with the negative 6u squared in one group, and then the other two terms in my other group. Remember, always put a plus sign between your two groups. It will probably help you for now to get your two highlighter colors and highlight the two groups. Remember, after you group them up, your next step is to take the GCF out of each group. So that goes back to the last lesson. When you take out the GCF from the pink group, it's 2u squared, and you're left with v minus 3. When you take out the GCF of the blue group, it's 5, and you're left with negative 3 plus v. These don't look the exact same. We have v minus 3 and negative 3 plus v. However, they are the same, they're just different order. V minus 3 is the same as negative 3 plus v. The v is positive, the 3 is negative. So these are the exact same thing. That was the goal. Whatever those two groups have in common, if you need to rewrite it, instead of writing negative 3 plus v, you can write v minus 3 if that helps you to see that they're the exact same, that's fine. And then you pull that out. Those two groups share the common factor of v minus 3. It's multiplied by 2u squared in the first group and positive 5 in the second group. To check your answer, you can always distribute it. Make sure all the terms match. You have all 4 terms shown, so you know you got it right. This factored form is your final answer. To help you out, I wrote out steps for you to follow when you're factoring by grouping. You're going to group up the terms into 2 groups with a parentheses and a plus sign between the 2 groups. You might want to consider using a highlighter to highlight each group a different color. After that, you take the GCF out of each group. Next, there should be a matching factor in the 2 groups. Like in the last one, it had a matching factor of v minus 3. You factor this out. The other parentheses is made up by what's on the outside of the common factors in each group. You can always check your answer by multiplying it out. Feel free to snip this into your notes if you'd like, or you can write it out, whatever's easiest for you. Now on the top of the next page, there are some practice problems. You are factoring each polynomial. So go ahead and work on these 4, and then I'll show you the answers after you come back. Pause the video now. Okay, here are your final answers. Here are the answers for A and B. And then here are the answers for C and D. You can pause if you need to. Make sure you got those correct. And then I wanted to just show you one more example where you have to sometimes factor with a negative 1. So let's say we were working on this example for factoring by grouping, and we group them up. We factor out the common factors 2m and 7. But notice that what we have in the parentheses doesn't match. K minus 6 is not the same as 6 minus k. The k is positive, whereas the k is negative. The 6 is negative, whereas over here the 6 is positive. Those are exact opposites. If you get exact opposite parentheses, what you need to do is redo it. So instead of factoring out a positive 7 from this group, you're going to instead factor out a negative 7. When you factor out a negative 7 instead of a positive 7, you have exactly the opposite now as what you did before. Because in order to get positive 42, you would have to multiply a negative by a negative. In order to get negative 7k, you would have to take negative 7 times positive k. So by factoring out that negative instead of a positive, now you've made it so that your groups are completely the same. K minus 6 is the same as negative 6 plus k because the k is positive, the 6 is negative. So now you can move on. Factor out the GCF from the 2 terms. The first group was multiplied by 2m, the second group was multiplied by negative 7. You can always double check that those are correct by multiplying it back together and making sure you end up with what you started with. I have a couple more practice problems for you here to practice that where you have to take out. Sometimes you might have to redo it and take out a negative instead of a positive. Go ahead and finish up by pausing the video and trying these last few practice problems. Okay, so here's the final answer for that problem. Notice you had to factor out a -4 on that practice problem to make the parentheses match. And then you take out that GCF of 1 minus 2d, or you could put -2d plus 1. They're the same thing, so it doesn't matter how you write it in the final answer. And then what the other factor would be is c minus 4, coming from what's on the outside of each group. Okay, so that wraps up our factoring by grouping. This is used when you have 4 or more terms. In the next lesson, we're going to be learning how to factor when you only have 3 terms. So it's going to come back to factoring by grouping. We'll actually turn it into a 4-term problem. So make sure you get this down before we move on to the next lesson. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out and get them answered. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, girls.